UFC Vegas 10 is live this Saturday night, featuring the strawweight bout between Michelle Waterson and Angela Hill. We're not going to get Glover Teixeira versus Thiago Santos this week, which is a real bummer. It's been pushed back a couple of weeks due to COVID-related issues. With that in mind, the last several events have seen a lot of highly anticipated bouts scrapped due to COVID. So, assuming that's going to happen again this week, I'm going to throw in 2 extra predictions just in case a couple of these main card fights get scrapped. So let's get right into it. Here's my predictions. One of the undercard matches I'm really looking forward to is a welterweight bout between Bryan Barbarina and Anthony Ivy. I guess I should preface this by saying that Bryan Barbarina is coming from Gym O, which is a gym that's starting to make a pretty good name for itself with a few UFC fighters who are doing all right. He also lives near Knoxville, which I live near Knoxville, so I find myself rooting for him. Barbarina has a lot of pressure with his offense. He has a great chin. Even though he's been KO'd a few times, he can absorb a lot of damage. The dude's an animal, and he's going to make you fight him. Ivy, of course, is coming off of that KO loss to Christian Aguilera, and that was only 3 months ago. I'm really not sure how good of a chin Ivy has, but he's only one fight in the UFC. He lost that one, of course, in that step up in competition. But a lot of things look good about him, and he very well may have a bright future ahead of him. That said, Bryan Barbarina is a tough draw for your second UFC fight, especially when the first one was a loss. Barbarina, inversely, has been in there for a little while. He's been in there with some tough dudes. He's got 10 UFC fights under his belt so far. He does have plenty of losses, but those losses are to good guys. His losses are to Vincent Luque, who's a real contender, and Barbarina was actually looking pretty good in that fight. He lost to Randy Brown, who's probably going to be a contender eventually. He's lost to Leon Edwards and Colby Covington, who, of course, are already contenders. He's got wins over Jake Ellenberger, Joe Proctor, Varley Alves, Sage Northcutt. So he's been in there with some tough guys. He's gotten it done with some of them. Fell short a few other times, but there's really no shame in losing to some of those names. Ivy is the bigger fighter, and he needs to try to keep his range or take it to the mat and stay on top of Barbarina. And Barbarina, he needs to try to turn this into a brawl. The question is really who can implement their game plan, who can control the pace better. Either way, Barbarina is a tough dude to finish, very difficult to put away. I see Barbarina getting stronger as the fight goes on. I think he's going to get a late stoppage. I'm going Bryan Barbarina with a 3rd round KO. The next undercard fight I'm going to highlight is the lightweight bout between Bobby Green and Alan Patrick. If a fight on the main card gets scrapped, my money says this one's moving up. Bobby has stayed extremely active recently. This will be his 3rd fight in 3 months. Patrick, on the other hand, hasn't really fought in a while. His last one was nearly 2 years ago, where he lost by KO to Scott Holtzman. That said, he's been trying to fight. Patrick has had many bouts that didn't come to fruition. He's been dropping weight, getting in good shape, and then been forced to find a new opponent a few times. I'm not sure how that's going to weigh on him mentally. Bobby has been getting better and better. He's kind of an old fighter. He's not as old as Patrick, but he's kind of an old fighter, but he's that rare fighter who's a lightweight but gets better and better with age. Patrick is an unorthodox southpaw fighter. He throws things from weird angles at weird times, and he often makes for a fun fight. Patrick does not have a lot of KOs on his resume, at least not in a while. And Bobby, he's a hard guy to finish anyway. The last person to finish Bobby Green was Dustin Poirier, and that was about 4 years ago. This should be a fun fight to watch. Both guys go to decision often, but both of these guys are fighters that really can string together 15 minutes of solid entertainment. It should be a stand-up fight with Bobby showing off his boxing and that famous shoulder roll that he does, and Patrick showing off those wild Brazilian strikes and kicks. I look for this to be a fight of the night contender, but I think Bobby's going to get it done. I'm going Bobby Green with an exciting unanimous decision win. Moving on up to the main card. First fight is a featherweight bout between Billy Quarantio and Kyle Nelson. These guys are kind of at the same place in their careers. 31 years old for Quarantio, 29 for Nelson. They have comparable records of 14-2 versus 13-3. This will be Quarantio's third UFC fight. It's Nelson's fourth. They've also both finished Kama Worthy, the co-main event on this card, but that was a strung-out 145-pound Kama Worthy. One very big difference, though, is that Quarantio is coming off of a good win over fan favorite Spike Carlisle and is riding a 7-fight win streak, while Nelson has lost 2 of his last 3. I do think that Quarantio is the better fighter and probably Nelson's hardest opponent to date. Nelson likes to start fast. His last 4 wins have come in the first round, but Quarantio, in my opinion, has better grappling, better ground control, and better pacing, and can probably survive that early onslaught. I think that Quarantio is going to have more advantages in more areas, and the longer the fight goes, the better chance he's going to have. I would look for Nelson to start strong, but for Quarantio to start to edge him out in the second and third rounds. I find it very likely that Quarantio wins this fight 2-1, but considering that Nelson's 1-2 in the UFC with both of those losses coming by stoppages, considering that Quarantio has a pretty healthy offering of subs and TKOs and referee stoppages on his resume, and of course considering that I'm ever the optimist, I'm going to call Billy Quarantio by 3rd round TKO. Next up is a light heavyweight bout between Ed Herman and Mike Rodriguez. I'm a big fan of Ed Herman. I always have been, but I'm a little worried about him here because he likes to grapple and clinch. He likes to hold his head down when he does so. And we just saw what Mike Rodriguez can do with his knees and his elbows in the clinch. I've not been very high on Rodriguez in the past, but he really did look good in that last fight against Prachniow. Ed's a much smarter fighter than Prachniow, though. He's truly a seasoned veteran, and he's seen all types of skill sets in his career. I mean, Rodriguez made his pro debut in 2014. Herman was on The Ultimate Fighter back in 2006. Herman has a 12-10-1 record in the UFC, so the dude's been around. It's not the best record, to be fair, but he has fought some really tough guys. He's been in there with Damian Maia, Alan Belcher, David Loiseau, Jake Shields, Jacare Souza, Talis Latis, Derek Brunson. The list goes on and on. Many of those guys have been title contenders. Ed Herman is, of course, a bit of a fan favorite to diehard MMA fans like myself because this dude is game. His best attributes are not only his submissions, but his craftiness, his slick transitions and setups, and of course his grit, that fighter mentality. He wants to fight on the ground, but he's not afraid to stand and bang. At 39 years old, though, he's slowing down, although Ed was never the quickest of fighters anyway, but his IQ is still growing. Not to call Ed Herman a slow starter, but the longer the fight goes on, the better chance he has of figuring out and capitalizing on his opponent. Plus, he's always shown a pretty adequate gas tank. I think of Mike Rodriguez as the near exact opposites. Not to call Rodriguez a fast starter, but the longer the fight goes on, the worse he tends to look. Rodriguez seems to have some cardio issues. He's gone to decision 3 times, and he hasn't won one yet. He does have some big power, much more than Herman does, but I see that as pretty much his only way to win. He does have 2 submissions on his resume, but up against a veteran like Ed Herman, he's not going to be sneaky enough to pull one off. Even if Rodriguez spends the majority of the fight on top of Ed is slick, man, and he's going to capitalize on whatever mistake Rodriguez gives him. I can definitely see Rodriguez winning this fight, probably by KO early if he does, but I think Ed Herman just has many more paths to victory, and I think his grit and experience is going to find one. I'm going Ed Herman by 3rd round submission. Next up is a women's flyweight bout between Roxanne Modafferi and Andrea Lee. Now, she surprised me in the past, but I'm just not very high on Roxanne Modafferi. I completely counted her out against Macy Barber. I really liked Macy and thought she was going to absolutely murder Roxanne. Yeah, Macy blew her knee out in that fight, but Roxanne was winning it before that happened. I don't want to trash Roxanne too much here. She seems like a really cool person. I like her dorky attitude. I think that I would enjoy hanging out with her. But I just don't think she's a very good mixed martial artist, especially for a person with 41 pro fights and has been doing it for as long as she has. I'm also not a fan of her style. Her punches don't seem to have much on them. She really relies on that boring, dominant position fight style. Andrea Lee, on the other hand, she does a pretty good job of stopping takedowns and getting back up when she has to. She does a pretty good job of straight jabs. She has good movement, and I think that's going to be the biggest difference. Roxanne appears to be the slower fighter in every fight she's ever been in, but somehow she always seems to slowly drag her opponent to the ground and then slowly climb on top of her opponent and then slowly beat up on them. I don't see Andrea Lee allowing that to happen, though. I expect Lee to hit Roxanne with several strikes, mixing some kicks, then get out of the way, and do it over and over again. Roxanne has had problems with that type of fighter, that quick volume striker. With 36 decisions between the two of these girls, and both of them, their last 5 fights have gone to decision, you gotta say it's a pretty safe bet this one's gonna end that way too. Roxanne is likely gonna come into this fight as a huge underdog, and I'm gonna counter out again, but crazier things have happened. I'm going Andrea Lee by unanimous decision. The co-main event is a lightweight bout between Ottman Azatar and Kama Worthy. Worthy is back at lightweight where he should be. I mean, he's a big lightweight anyway. He was really struggling to get to 145, and I feel like it was affecting his performance. He'll be a much better version of himself in this weight class. This should be a great fight. This is my other nomination for potential fight of the night. Azatar comes out swinging for the fences. He's very good. He's very fast. He's got a lot of power. Worthy is a pretty patient fighter. I don't think he's going to make the same mistakes as Azatar's other opponents have. Worthy has been discounted in the past, probably because of his record, which is 16-6, but he is on a 7-fight win streak, and a lot of his losses have come to legit guys. His losses were pre-UFC, but are still names you'd probably recognize. Kyle Nelson and Billy Quarantio are both on this card. He also lost to Paul Felder in his 3rd professional fight. Worthy also has a pretty long amateur record, which makes him a more seasoned fighter than his official record suggests. Ottman is the opposite. No losses yet, some questionable opponents, and no amateur record at all. That said, Ottman has finished 11 of 12 opponents. He can't help how good his opponent is, but he can help how fast he gets him out of there. So back to the fight. It should be a great fight, but I think the size difference is going to be a pretty big factor. Worthy's got the reach advantage and height advantage by a pretty considerable margin, so Azatar is going to have to advance when attacking. Worthy also has good power, and he likes to use those straight jabs. This could go either way, but considering Worthy's patience to find the right strikes, his height advantage to force Ottman to advance, and his power in his straight jabs, I just think that the formula says Kama Worthy's going to win. I'm going Kama Worthy by 3rd round TKO. The main event will of course be Michelle Waterson versus Angela Hill. Man, I am so upset that we're not getting Teixeira versus Santos this week. I'm also pretty upset that it didn't move somebody else up a week or two, and that we're stuck with this fight as a 5-round fight. That said, props to Waterson and Hill for agreeing to do a 5-round fight. When we recently saw Rakic and Smith decline the option, we even saw Shabazian and Brunson decline the option. So props to these girls for showing how game they are. That said, I think the 5 rounds favor Angela Hill a little more. Angela is very athletic. She's always in shape. She always seems capable of going a little longer. And she always seems to be fighting on short notice. So this late notice extension of 10 minutes really seems to be in her wheelhouse. She just seems ready at any time. Angela has been very active lately. This will be her 4th fight in 2020 and her 5th fight in 1 calendar year. Waterson is pretty active too, just not to the extent that Angela Hill has been. Back to the fight, I just don't like Waterson a whole lot. She doesn't seem to throw with any intention, or frequency for that matter, but Angela Hill does. Angela is definitely a volume striker, and she's pretty good with pretty much all strikes from all angles. Waterson has that karate stance, that wide stance, and I think Angela's really going to beat those legs up. When Waterson does throw those karate kicks and punches, I think Angela's going to be fast enough to get out of the way, and if Waterson tries to close the distance, Angela has some pretty good Muay Thai, and I think she'll use those elbows and knees. Waterson's best chance is likely on the ground, but Angela has pretty good takedown defense and can often rely on her athleticism to get out of those positions. I think the biggest difference here is that Waterson seems kind of stiff and static, where Angela gets a good flow to her. She does a good job of mixing up all types of strikes, the kinds of things that can really drown an opponent the further the fight gets, things like body shots and such. I think the easy bet here is on a decision, but 25 minutes is an awfully long time. Waterson has shown some good durability. She's going to be hard to get out of there, but I think Angela's going to find a way to do it. I can see Angela Hill coming on strong the longer the fight lasts and eventually becoming too much for Waterson. I think at some point she's going to hurt her, put her on the ground, finish it off with a rear naked choke or some kind of mercy killing like that. I'm calling Angela Hill by a 5th round submission. There's my predictions for UFC Vegas 10. Man, it sucks we're not getting Teixeira versus Santos this week, but it's still a pretty entertaining cards with a lot of unique matchups, so I'm pretty excited about it. After the event, we'll do a winners and losers video like always, so hit the subscribe button so you can be notified of when that video gets uploaded, as well as any more content that might come out this week. Till next time.